Mr. Speaker, I join with all the honorable members who spoke before in thanking the staff of the Ministry of Finance and other ministries and agencies who worked diligently in providing the information needed to craft Budget 2019, which is the penultimate budget of this government. I've never heard such a lengthy presentation before, and I must congratulate the Minister for his stamina in doing so. Unfortunately, Minister, while the presentation was lengthy, it was short in addressing some of the most pressing issues that are presently affecting the country. Considerable time was spent on providing a framework on what the government intends to do in the years ahead. But the most repetitive words were, "we will." It reminds me a lot of those conferences where considerable time is spent on coming up with the right words and phrases for the outcome documents, but implementation never happens. As I read the speech, my mind raced back to the time when the National Development Strategy was being crafted. There was euphoria from all those who were involved in the process because it provided an opportunity for all Guyanese from all walks of life to participate in a process that was intended to put Guyana on the developmental path. We all want the best for Guyana, and we all want to see the transformation of our country. This desire, Mr. Speaker, predates us, and perhaps it is opportune to remind ourselves of the early 1950s when our nationalist leaders crafted their manifesto for the election of 1953. That vision and developmental thrust frightened the colonial masters so badly that they felt compelled to remove the democratically elected government representatives of the people and installed an interim government, handpicked by the then powers that be. In essence, Mr. Speaker, the desire to develop Guyana is more than half a century ago. All the lofty measures which were referred to are close to our hearts. Both parties in power have sought to improve and enhance the landscape of our country based on the respective vision and priority. One of the honorable members of the government benches asked the question, how come we, the opposition, do not see anything positive in the budget? My response to him is that all those policies and measures which benefit the working people and the poor are always welcome. There is no need to rehash those. And it is on that note that I will proceed to remind the Minister of Finance for his memory lapse in not remembering the more than 7,500 sugar workers who were put on the breadline. Nothing was said about what the government intends to do for those whose services were brought to an end. Nothing was said about initiatives by the government to help those workers. I know the mouth is muzzled by the food it eats, but all those who are on the breadline have families and bills to take care of. It is not a laughing matter, but one that must be treated with a matter of urgency. The manner in which these workers were treated will not be forgotten, especially when they came to picket the parliament, and Mr. Speaker, it so happened there's a picket right now, when they were mocked, harassed, and cursed out by the government-organized counter-picket. They did not come to seek a handout. No, Mr. Speaker, they were here requesting their severance, which they work hard for, And as we speak, while we heard that the severance will be given, as far as we know, it still has not been given because it has been embroiled in some other matters. Mr. Speaker, the end-of-year outcome 2017, which was issued on the 12th April 2018, referred to the annual real GDP rates by sector. The sugar, rice, and bauxite sectors are all critical sectors. No matter what we envisage for the future, the reality is that our country is still dependent on these three sectors. They are important historically and at the present moment. There is something important that we must never forget. The abundance of food in our markets is possible because of those who are working in very difficult conditions, in the sun, the rain, and mud, to make it possible. Their hard work speaks for itself, and so does their contribution to our economy. Those who look down on them with disdain must be reminded of the saying, "From the sweat of thy brow thou shalt eat bread." Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to the much-touted mantra of the coalition government on accountability and good governance. I believe that they have already forgotten what they said they will do, and I just need to jog their memory a little. The section of your manifesto on good governance states, and I quote, "To defend and increase the civil liberties of our people and regulate government's intervention in political, economic, and social issues affecting the people, to build institutions to eliminate corruption and government waste, and improve fairness in the distribution of wealth of the nation, and to ensure that every citizen has equitable access to the resources of the state and the national decision-making process in keeping with Article 13 of our Constitution." End of quote. Minister, I give you credit for the setting up of the Public Procurement Commission. What causes great concern, however, is the great number of corrupt practices and transactions that are going on. I just wish to refer to several of these which were pointed out on page 4 of the Auditor General's report for the fiscal year which ended in December 2017. He drew our attention to the vacancies within the region, in which he said, and I quote, "An analysis of the employment details for Region 1 to 10 revealed that the Public Service Commission staff vacancy circular number 12 of 2017 had advertised for a total of 323 vacancies. These staff vacancies included critical posts such as 2 regional health officers, 1 regional education officer, 3 chief accountants, 4 senior personnel officers, and 6 procurement officers, among others. On the 19 matters highlighted in the Auditor General report, most were related to the regions. And the question is why these vacancies were not filled, since these were necessary for check and balance. Your guess is as good as mine. Then there is a 500 million which was expended on the Durban Park rehabilitation. According to the report, 6 payments were made by the relevant ministry to Homestretch Development, Inc. However, only documents indicating HDI creditors and government's proposed payment allocation to the creditors were attached to the payment vouchers. The Guyana Revenue Authority is another agency that was mentioned in the report. The report states that a mere 17% of the 105,522 self-employed persons filed income tax returns totaling 4.9 billion. This represents non-compliance by 83% of the 887,171 of taxpayers in this category. Another important issue which was referred to is the employment cost. It was pointed out that employment costs appear to have been over budgeted for in 2017. In this regard, 9 out of the 10 administrative regions' expenditure amounted to 14.412 billion for 11,652 staff. According to the national estimate, the total funds available under employment costs total 14.671 billion for a total staff complement of 10,836. This represents 814 staff more than what was budgeted for and 258,499,000 under the budgeted expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the public account statement refers to the shortfall in expenditure. It is stated that there was a shortfall of expenditure totaling 15.65 million, of which 9.202 billion was for capital expenditure and 6.448 billion was for current expenditure. The shortfall in capital expenditure was attributed primarily to low execution rate of many major foreign funded projects, whilst the shortfall of current expenditure was mainly due to unspent allocation of 1.655 billion, 1.33 billion, and 1.008 billion under the Ministry of Social Protection, Ministry of Education, and the public debt for servicing of loans, respectively. With respect to follow-up actions on the implementation, 602 recommendations were made in the 2016 audit report. Each recommendation was analyzed to determine what action, if any, was taken by the respective accounting officers. At the time of reporting, 178 recommendations, or 30%, were partially implemented, while 174, or 28% of the recommendations, were not implemented. The Auditor General concluded his observation with the following statement, and I quote, "Overall, I am concerned with the lack of action towards the implementation of these recommendations, since 58% of these have not been fully implemented. In addition, in many instances, recommendations are repeated each year without appropriate action, and as a result, weaknesses and issues that impacted negatively on government's governance and accountability mechanism continue to occur. Once again, I encourage the government, through the Ministry of Finance, the Accountant General Department, and the respective heads of the budget agencies to take appropriate action and put measures in place to address the recommendation made in my prior report and this year as well." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, we also heard about the 54-page feasibility study, which was done by a hand-picked contractor for the tune of $150 million, which cost $2.5 million per page, which ultimately ended up in the waste paper basket. We heard about corruption in book distribution, the school feeding program, and the $138 million which was spent on gas and which could not be accounted for. The opening batsman of the PPPC on the economy provided very useful information when he reminded us that the government had spent more than $1 trillion since assuming office. He provided statistics to show that large portions of the government expenditure was channeled into areas that do not stimulate economic growth or do not improve the well-being of the population. And under the caption, "Where is the money going?" I want to refer to employment cost. And for example, from 2014 to 2019, since taking office in 2014, employment cost has increased by more than $28.9 billion, or 69%. In 2019, of the total increase in government's expenditure, which is pegged at $30 billion, employment costs represent 39%. On the field materials, this line item has seen a 62% in allocation, or $709 million since 2014. Under print and non-print, this line item also has seen a 53%, or $614 million increase in allocation since 2014. Under fuel and lubricant, this allocation item has increased by more than $561 million, or 25% since 2014. Rental of building, more than 104%, or $828 million since 2014. In other words, Mr. Speaker, government is about to rent twice the amount of buildings in 2019 when compared to 2014. And on the maintenance of buildings, allocation has increased by more than 78%, or $1.6 billion since 2014. And I wish to continue the list and to show that in the case of local travel and subsistence, this line item has seen a 71%, or $1.5 billion increase in allocation since 2014. Other transport and travel by more than 60%, or $523 million. On telephone charges, 51%, or $278 million since 2014. On the security, Mr. Speaker, we have seen the increase in allocation by more than 84% or $2.6 billion since 2014. Critically to note, personal bodyguards for minister are paid under this line item. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask, almost all these people are honorable security personnel. I wonder who they're afraid of. And then on the national and other event, this line item has seen 141%, or $676 million increase in allocation since 2014. And we're noting also the additional $350 million that is set aside for the Golden Jubilee celebration. In total, approximately $603 million is set aside for the celebration in 2009. I hope we don't have another Durban Park fiasco. And on the dietary, Mr. Speaker, this line item has seen 58%, or $2.1 billion increase in allocation since 2014. Meals, refreshments, etc. for the ministers and other senior staff are usually funded under this line item. And Mr. Speaker, I wonder how they couldn't find the money to bail out Gaisuku and to pay the sugar workers. But let's continue. Another critical issue that I wish to draw to the attention, Mr. Speaker, is that of social cohesion. On page 29 of the budget speech, the Minister of Finance referred to social cohesion, and I wish to quote what he said in light of recent events. Before taking office, this administration recognized the less than satisfactory state of affairs with respect to cultural and ethnic tension in this land of 6 people. This is why we have continually supported a national drive for improved social cohesion and relation amongst our citizens. It is incumbent on us to lead the way towards realizing a society that is more cohesive. Very important words, Mr. Speaker. We are also reminded of the objective of the social cohesion as reflected in the estimates of the public sector. And what does it say? It is to foster Guyana where diversities are embraced, conflicts resolved, and networks and collaboration with stakeholders strengthen and decision-making processes result in equal opportunities for all. I wish to reiterate the last words, equal opportunities for all. It sounds very pleasing to the ears, but the events which have occurred from day one of the swearing in of the president to this day has been the complete opposite. The sentiments expressed by 2 senior government leaders publicly point to the intolerance and failure to remember that we are a plural society. From the bottom to the top of the employment ladder, the administration has unleashed its campaign of discrimination, targeting tenure, benefits, and allowances of some persons who were employed in the public service. I have looked at the 3 indicators of the social cohesion division, and one speak to peaceful coexistence within and across communities. My question to all of you honorable men and women in this assembly: how can we have peaceful coexistence in the face of blatant discrimination? Mr. Speaker, I have perused the budget agencies within the Ministry of Presidency, which are as follows: social cohesion, cultural preservation and conservation, youth and sport, and the total sum that is being requested is $4.2 billion. 158 contract workers are expected to be employed in these 4 agencies, while policy development and administration has a total of 217 contract employees, and the sum which is being sought is $2.5 billion. The Ministry of Presidents alone has 475 contract workers. When in opposition, these honorable members were so much against contract workers, and now one ministry alone has so many. The question I wish to posit is whether these positions were chosen by the method as espoused by a high-level government official. I have perused the objective of cultural preservation and conservation, and recognizing that we have a diverse population with different cultures, I would like to know whether the approach was an inclusive one and whether all ethnic groups were considered. Similarly, I have looked at the objectives of the Agency of Youth and would like to know whether urban and rural communities were treated alike and whether all regions and communities benefited. Traveling across the country, there is a paucity of sports activities, and I am not sure whether grounds are even maintained regularly. I would like to know how many grounds benefit from the resources that were allocated to that department and whether these activities were held. Mr. Speaker, when the Ministry of Social Cohesion was set up, we cautioned this National Assembly that it was usurping the work of the Ethnic Relations Commission. This seemed to be another ploy to create more jobs and benefits for friends of the party, similar to what the Ministry of National Mobilization used to do. It seems to me that the Ministry of the Presidency has taken over that role. If what I'm saying is inaccurate, I wish to be proven correct by providing the information to show that it is not so. We cannot have social cohesion in our society if all ethnic group traditions and cultures are not considered equally. Numerous building blocks lead to a strong foundation. I know the minister has been trying his level best, but when other members of government throw several spanners in the work, he will have a much more difficult time. It is like one step forward and several steps backwards. Mr. Speaker, I wish to address the promise made by the coalition government to restore law and order. Criminal activities have seemingly increased, where homes and premises are constantly under threat from bicycle and motorcycle gangs. Citizens are fed up with the scourge of lawlessness. The airline debacle and the recent occurrence at an international conference make us look bad as a people. It is so shameful that this behavior is embraced by those who are supposed to be the first responders in emergency situations. We have a number of security experts in the government, and I'm pretty sure that they can deal with the problem if they want to. In the APNU Coalition Manifesto, under the section dealing with crime, it was stated that the government will confront serious crime, arrest the spread of organized gangs, and improve public and personal security. The question the people are asking is, what is the government doing to bring an end to this criminality which has escalated? Maybe we should hold a referendum, Mr. Speaker, and ask the citizens how they feel about the crime situation. Under housing, I listened in amazement as the Minister with responsibility for housing reported on her stewardship of the housing sector. I can see why the Ministry of Housing was closed down in the early 1980s. The policy reminds me of the saying, a Cadillac lifestyle in a donkey cart economy. I wish to remind the Minister, from the period which is referred to until 1993, there was no policy in place for land nor housing. It was the PPPC under the stewardship of the late President Jagan that launched the initiative to provide land for those who were desirous of building a home. I wish to digress a little bit, Mr. Speaker, to refer to history, to show consistency in the policy of the PPPC government as it pertains to housing. Mrs. Janet Jagan, who held the portfolio of the Minister of Labour, Health and Housing, initiated Operation Housing during the PPP tenure in office from 1957 to 1961. Self-help houses, council houses for rent in East and West Rheinveld, Lang Avenue and La Penitence, and the development of residential housing area at Wismar are but a few of the initiatives taken. Much was said about the progress in the housing sector of the PPPC government and the transformation. Really and truly, honorable members, it is very clear for all to see if you want to see. The housing program which the government has adopted is ineffective, since only a few persons are benefited. Corruption, nepotism, and cronyism will be the order of the day, as it was under the past, under the PPPC, under the PNC government. The Minister of Finance, in his budget presentation, referred to the projected growth of over 30% from the oil sector. It is therefore important at this time to recognize the foresight of former President Jagan when she signed the exploratory petroleum lease. Budget 2019 is premised on all dividends, and all that promise of what will be made possible because of it. It is a testimony to the PPPC transformation vision for developing the industry. Minister, in page 19 of the budget speech, you alluded to the potential benefits of the oil money. And I wish to quote a section of what you said in your preamble to the agenda for 2019, and I quote, "As much as the highly anticipated oil revenues will make many of these dreams possible, they will not be reachable if our institutions and our systems continue to operate with high degrees of inefficiency." It is the strength of our institutions and system across every single sector that will determine the effectiveness of our programs and service delivery to our people. While our government will make additional resources available, this will be done with due diligence, care, and regard for their value, scarcity, and opportunity costs, end of quote. Very important observation, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister. But you will need to ensure that the present discriminatory practice comes to an end, so that all Guyanese will get jobs based on their qualifications and not their party cards or affiliation. This dream that you presented can only materialize when all sections of the country can benefit from the anticipated oil well. People are still amazed when we talk about diversity of our country, But yet when we go to most government departments, some groups are invisible. This does not augur well for cohesion in Guyana. This has to change if we truly want peace and cohesion. Mr. Speaker, you shut your mouth. Mr. Speaker,
I'll remember you have 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, in an economy where blue-collar jobs are hard to come by, especially because of the decline in some sector, more and more persons will be turning to the government sector for white-collar jobs. Competition for jobs will become more intense. The children of workers, farmers, miners, and laborers are all desirous of having a decent job. They want to serve their country and they want to have a good life. Job creation in this regard is a must. It therefore baffles the mind, Mr. Speaker, when instead of creating more jobs, we're making people redundant. The dream, Mr. Minister, you refer to will only materialize for your supporters as espoused by your senior functionary. It is incumbent, therefore, to remind your party and government of the mandate and promise that they made with respect to constitutional reform within a system of participatory democracy. MP Carrington spoke about the need for unity and for us to work together. To the honourable member, I wish to state that the PPP has always recognized this need, since it is the only way we can move this country forward. For us in the PPP, national unity and cooperation have been the hallmark of our governance structure. I wish to remind you of the period from 1961 to 64, when the PPP government had invited Mr. Burnham and the PNC to join in a unity government. That letter was not even acknowledged by Mr. Burnham. Again, in the 80s, when the PNC was in office through rigged elections, the PPP offered critical support when the country was under threat. Similarly, in 1990, in preparation for the 1992 elections, the PPP once again took up the issue of a united government. So, Mr. Carrington, Guyana can only move forward in a positive direction when the people of this country, through their respective leaders and party, are prepared to work for the good. And from what I have said, you know that we took the leadership in that regard, where unity is concerned. The ethnic and political insecurities that come to the fore from time to time must be confronted. It is my considered view, Mr. Speaker, that this be put on the front burner in anticipation of all revenues.
Honourable, you have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ethnic and political insecurities that come to the fore from time to time must be confronted. It is my considered view that this be put on the front burner in anticipation of all revenues being a catalyst for rapid economic development. The people deserve policies that are both inclusive and equitable. Mr. Speaker, the minister has made a lot of promises. Unfortunately, he has not dealt with the most pressing issues confronting the country at this moment. Therefore, I cannot support the budget as presented by the Minister of Finance. I thank you.